All right, we got a great show coming up for you today. We update the Joe Harris injury status, think about what that means, not only for the starting rotation, but the impact it has to the roster as a whole, whether it's short or long term. And then, of course, take a dip into that Golden State Warrior matchup coming on Tuesday night and what we can expect to learn from a difficult Western Conference matchup, Dougster.
And I think we freak out. I think I freak out a little bit about this Joe
You're
Harris
freaking
injury,
out.
which might be nothing, but we're going to talk about why even like a game or two missing from Joe Harris, like why it's a pretty big deal. We'll get into it all, but first, the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo.
Welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am Adam Armbrecht. He is Doug Norrie. And we're going to be breaking down a number of different things on today's episode, which is brought to you, by the way, by our good friends over at Rock Auto. They've got amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the car parts you'll ever need, rockauto.com. Doug, how are we as we look ahead to the potential matchup with the Golden State Warriors, but first do some housekeeping around the Brooklyn Nets?
Yeah, I mean, like we talked yesterday where I got a little crazy about the about the handling of the Joe Harris injury in the moment. And then Nets have ruled him already out for this game on Tuesday, which really isn't surprising when you see how he just looks hurt, right? Like, so they're calling it an ankle sprain. I don't think they gave a timeline for what his return is going to be like. I will say typically when players are ruled out a full day in advance of a game, like that does not usually mean good things, right? Like that's like, we're not even testing it. This is a problem. It doesn't mean he's going to be out 2 months, right? But yeah, there's probably a little bit of concern here because when you are ruled out, like I said, a full day in advance, that means you're not even close to being able to play.
You're not even in the practice facility, testing some things, whatever. It's like,
Right.
If you're not going to be there, the media is then going to probably follow up and ask about it. So Joe Harris not available against the Golden State Warriors, and you would assume, at least for the short term, he won't be available for the Brooklyn Nets overall. As we get into now replacing then Joe Harris, I have a couple of baseline numbers for what it means to have him out of the roster. Of course, we remind everybody that we thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. We're free on all those platforms, so go and enjoy. We love the support, and we hope we give you a quality show, just like this one. Well, I'll tell you, Doug, so I know you have a couple of deeper stats, but the initial ones on Joe Harris, I just pulled them up quickly. Remember, Joe had a slow start to the season to some Brooklyn Nets fans. Absolute disgust, and they wanted him to be off the team, essentially. But he ranks third and is in a virtual tie with LaMarcus Aldridge for field goal attempts per game. The Nets average 84 per game. Joe Harris has basically 9, and that's 10% of the shot selection that you're going to get. And the little bit deeper inside of that is that he is surprisingly behind Patty Mills, who's been up and down, but has been an absolute fireball from beyond the arc. He's right behind Mills on the team for 3-point field goal percentage at 46, almost 47. So that's where we start. You're losing 10% of your shot selection, and you're also losing, even if Mills is ahead of him, you're losing your best 3-point shooter as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, people that were mad at Joe Harris to start the year wanted to just be mad at him. I don't really know another way to put it. They were
still mad from last season, right? You're mad for the playoffs, and that's it.
Yeah. Like, and I really actually think there was a group of people probably out there that were like actively rooting for him to be bad because they want some weird confirmation that he should have been traded or whatever the heck was some of the storylines were. But it's just really not the case. And it's actually really funny about how these things kind of end up working out because for all the struggles that he struggled at the beginning of the year, which there were some games where it was looking a little bit rough. When you remember this 3-point shooting is just streaky in general because it's a more difficult shot than other shots. And two, like they can kind of get lumped together. When you actually look at where he is now compared to where he had started, he's third in the league in 3-point field goal percentage among qualified players, right? And the group above him is, well, Patty Mills is second, so good on them for having the two of the three best. And I think he's 13th in effective field goal percentage. He was even higher last year, and he's 13th effective field goal percentage and climbing. So there's this idea that, he was struggling or he doesn't add stuff to the team. He just, when it took, a few games, and all of a sudden he's one of the very best shooters of basketball ever again.
Right.
Like these things aren't mistakes. Like the guys like Joe Harris just don't learn to shoot. Don't forget how to shoot. And losing him, for as much as some fans were disappointed, and those people have mostly quieted down because he's been so good of late, that
it's a lot harder to criticize him when he's one of the best shooters.
Everyone just shuts up then, right? Like everyone zips it. Everyone zips it when he's making shots, whatever. But you now have to just effectively go. What you're actually saying here is we have to go out and try to replace one of the best shooters in basketball. Like that's what they have. Yeah. He's one of the very best shooters in basketball. The numbers bear it out, and you now have to figure out how to get a lot of minutes from an incredibly efficient scorer. And we can talk about how that's going to happen, but you can't slice it any other way. It's a really bad loss for one game or whatever it's going to end up being for him. This is a guy that's kind of tough to lose.
Yeah, as big as anything is the 30 minutes per game that he plays, because we've talked about in the podcast, you mentioned it all the time, of innings eaters. In a lot of ways, Joe Harris is effectively, he's not just an innings eater, a guy you're bringing off the bench to chew up some clock, but he is incredibly effective in terms of the minute share that represents for this team. Before we even get into adjusting the lineup, who's going to replace it, how do you try to manufacture success, just in general, because we talked about it on that post game, saying, see what happens with Joe, everything from Nash, from Durant, as far as his shoulder, they say, nothing to worry about, playing through it, managing it, etc. But we've highlighted, especially when you come into the season without Kyrie Irving already, one injury, especially to a starting rotation player, it starts to be, it could be a snowball effect. It's only going to take one nagging injury for, like we said, Blake Griffin playing really physical, right? All of a sudden, the Nets could find themselves scrambling, even if it's just for 10 or 15 games.
Well, now they're down 2 starters because you have to count the Kyrie thing as being down a starter. Yep. I know people have kind of washed that away from their memory because it's just easier to not think about it. Like it's one of those painful things. So it's like, well, if I just stop thinking about it, maybe it'll make it better. I'll feel better about the situation. But you're already down 1 starter. Now you're down 2. They've made it work without him. But injuries just have cascading effects. And luckily Harris is like sort of replaceable in what they do because they have Patty Mills. But you make a really good point about 30 minutes. Like making up 30 minutes is not this one-to-one venture where you just bring in the Joe Harris clone to play another 30 minutes and shoot the absolute lights out of the building. It's just not how it works. The 30 minutes then have to get divvied up to other players. Patty Mills cannot go in and play, because I'm sure we're going to talk about Patty Mills here, but like he can't go in and play the minutes he was already playing and the 30 that Joe Harris plays. Like people get confused about this math a lot, right? The math escapes them where they're like, oh, we have these other things. Yeah, he can't do both things, right? He can't play 48 minutes of a basketball game or play those minutes where they shared the court together. There has to be someone else out there. So you can't just give it to this one.
When Patty Mills has played 25 minutes per game, sorry, just quickly, he's played 25 minutes per game. So as you say, Doug, just play 55 minutes a game, Patty. Is that so? I don't understand why the math doesn't check out.
I cannot believe, it is unbelievable to me how this is lost. Unlike smart people get this point gets lost on them, where like people that watch a lot of basketball just think that there's like these minutes just kind of, you can just grab them out of thin air. And if you have another player, yeah, it's good to have other players behind them, but those players are already playing. It's not like they're just bringing in someone else that was like, hey, look what we found in the back. Look what I found in the back of the room. This thing that I never even knew was here. We haven't been using it all year, but now we can use it. People think, I really think people think like this when it comes to replacing minutes. It just doesn't work. So there's no other way to put it. It's 1 game, 2 games, 10 games, whatever it ends up. It won't probably be that long, but whatever it ends up being, it is hard to replace guys like this that are this good and play, like you said, play so much already at really effective minutes.
And what'll be interesting is, because like you say, this may not be a long-term injury for Harris, but it is going to be, as we've kind of said about the lineup and different adjustments the coaching staff is trying to make. Well, here's a small sample. What do you do if you lose one of your significant, and let's frame it the right way, offensive players when you already come into the year, as you pointed out, without Kyrie Irving, right? So however many games you get, you better, maybe I wonder what it'll look like for Steve Nash. How flexible will you be with what type of options you throw out there so that you maybe prepare yourself for what could come at any point throughout the season for any number of your starters. So I want to get into
real quick, let me just say one more thing and then you can move on. But like, I'm not even mentioning that like Claxton isn't around here, like Mills have some personal reasons. These are not, this is has already started to pile up. We can talk about it next, but we can talk about like this piling on effect of what's been happening here that I'm just not sure people realize, and I'm not chicken little skies falling here, but I'm going to go through a couple other examples of like why this is we are going to go through a couple other examples like why this is a problem.
Yeah, nothing official as far as injuries, but players have come and gone kind of out of the lineup over the course of the start of the season. Before we get back into it, though, of course, Joe Harris, we know if he's looking to recover quickly and he's having some aches and pains along the way, he's going to reach for the Theragun. It is a handheld percussive therapy device that releases your deepest muscle tension using scientifically calibrated combo of depth, speed, and power. And it's as quiet as an electric toothbrush, my friends. The Gen 4 Theragun doesn't just feel good, it gets to the source of the pain by releasing tension using the Theragun's signature percussive therapy, which goes 60% deeper than vibration alone. If it's more, it's got to be better. That's why you want to get over and try out the Theragun for 30 days, starting at only $199. You go to therabody.com/locked-on right now and get your Gen 4 Theragun today. That's therabody.com/locked-on, therabody.com/locked-on. So as you said, now there's the deeper layer behind it and a couple other numbers that come out. You already start to mention the minute share. So you're thinking about Mills and Brown. Those guys average 25 minutes a game. One of the things that you run a risk of, as you say, well, we'll replace Harris by giving more minutes to other players. There's sometimes a reason why you're trying to fit certain guys into minute shares because you don't want to overexpose them, whether it's offensively or defensively. That becomes a factor. The next guy down, this is going in order of shot volume for the team, is Blake Griffin at 23 minutes. The question that I'll now put to you, or I'll frame it this way, when you look at the shooters in behind Joe Harris, so it's super easy to go, Patty Mills, more of him. Bruce Brown is not going to give you high field goal percentages, at least, from beyond the arc, and neither is Blake Griffin necessarily. So the diminishing returns on where give the guys that are already taking shots more shots. You're not going to get the same percentages and effective field goal percentages that you get with Joe Harris.
Yeah, and so right, that's exactly right. You're not because so let's just assume that Patty Mills probably starts, right? He started the second half last game. It worked out really well. He was good. He was an absolute flamethrower. It makes a lot of sense that they'll go into this game with Patty Mills in the starting lineup along them or alongside the other guys, right? Like, do we agree? I don't think they've announced it, but I think we would agree that that's probably where they end up going. I
have a curiosity about a question I wanted to pose to you about the starting rotation, but keep going with Mills for now.
The issue is what happens next, because it was before that Patty Mills came in on that first rotation and was that second unit scorer. Patty Mills has to get a rest. What did they do after that, right? Because actually after him, they don't have another Patty Mills behind him, right? So the Patty Mills was that was like the really nice piece that you brought up with that second unit with Aldridge. It's been really, really effective. That group's been awesome. It's been one of the main reasons that they have the record they have. It's because that second unit with those two guys leading it is so effective in scoring. You're now probably essentially breaking that up. Maybe not. Maybe they do something different. Like maybe they start someone else, because the other problem is Patty Mills is not like a really effective defensive replacement for Joe Harris. Mm-hmm. And it's not like Joe Harris is some great defender. He's not, but he's pretty strong and he is bigger. And like, he can't, like, Mills cannot take on the exact same defensive assignments as Harris. And so it does create this other little problem of he's just not like a total 1-for-1. So you have two problems. No. One, he's not a 1-for-1 for Harris on the defensive end. And two, what are you doing by effectively breaking up your second unit? I think that's a real question they need to ask themselves. You can get by with it for one game and one half of a game like they did last game, but you need to ask yourself, that's really worked really well for us. Do we need to have him on the court with Durant and Harden? Right? Like maybe they don't. Maybe they start someone else. Like it's not totally clear though, like who that is.
So yeah, so actually it does get me to my question that I want to ask you, which is the assumption would be move Patty Mills into the starting lineup. And I actually was going to say, yes, do that. And this doesn't solve the problem of what happens in the second unit. I think that's going to be a mixed bag. So maybe you touched on it that keeping Patty Mills out of the starting lineup is right so that you maintain that offensive output in the second unit along with Aldridge. But then in the starting unit, originally I was going to say to you, if you put in Mills, maybe you put Mills into the backcourt and you put Bembry into the lineup effectively at the 3. So now you do give yourself some more defensive upside in the starting unit. You still maintain some of the firepower you lost with Joe Harris, and you keep your starting unit very, very effective. But maybe it's a layer deeper of saying maybe it shouldn't be Patty Mills. You stick with Bruce Brown. You bring in Bembry. You make your starting unit better defensively. You obviously lose some of the outside shooting, but you trust that at least for the first wave of the game, you're going to have a lot of Kevin Durant. You're going to have a lot of James Harden, and then you live with it from there and keep a little bit more balance in your second unit.
Yeah, you don't get much spacing with that, and that's going to be a problem. The Warriors are really good. Like the Warriors are a very good defensive team. They've trended a little small. That actually probably helps the Nets a little bit in this scenario where they play. They start Looney, but then they end up playing Draymond a lot at the 5, and so like for the Nets here, that probably does help their personnel wise a little bit. Like they could go another direction where they start Javon Carter and just kind of have him run around and chase Steph, like the whole like where
And
Bruce
he's been a little
Brown
bit
and
better overall for
yeah, like
Carter.
he and Bruce Brown, they just can sprint all over and try to chase Steph all over and under screens for not under screens, over screens for the entire game, and like hope that he can hit. He's shooting 30% from 3 right now. Hope that he can stay somewhere in there, space the court just enough because you're not really going to get that from Bembry. So like he can space the court just enough, and then you can keep Mills together, and you say, okay, well we still have James Harden and Kevin Durant on the court. The reason we're like kind of going on and on about this, I think, is that or not, I know. It sounds like, okay, well, it's one game. It's Joe Harris. No, like, I guarantee you, we are going to be talking about this a lot this season. Like, this injury stuff, we are going to have, I don't want to do it, but it's just so plain as day. Wouldn't you say that, like, this is the first of many conversations we are going to have this season about injuries because the team is just too old. It's just going to happen. Like, they are going to get injured, and they're going to have to play this game the whole season of, especially with no Kyrie, and that's looking incredibly pessimistic on that. Like, they're just gonna have to. This is gonna be a lot of this kind of like moving the chess pieces around a lot of the season. And I hate to like sound like it's sky's falling, but I think it's actually. I think we're thinking about it more because it's part of a. I think it's just part of a bigger thing.
Well, by the way, the reason why, and you're going to take the sample size and see what happens, because we were talking about, well, LaMarcus Aldridge may need to miss some time. Blake Griffin, now Millsap has been in and out of the lineup, obviously. But in the start of this season, you've seen one, for illness, that's at least what get labeled as. We haven't seen a lot of Nick Claxton, already tried and maybe saw a failed experiment there. And then this is Joe Harris. Like, Joe Harris wasn't on the list of guys that has an injury and is out of this lineup. The idea was, what do we do when one of the old players gets hurt? Now it's actually the guy in his prime that's gotten hurt. And no matter how short the time is, it does just open up your eyes, I think, to the reality, right? You're one injury away because of how you came into this season of all of a sudden needing to make maybe wholesale adjustments to make sure that your team is balanced. So that's the weird part about now. Do you shuffle this deck a little bit because this one's a short term? I will say, because it's a short term injury. Do you think that it's easier for Steve Nash to say Carter into the starting lineup, leave in whatever, Bembry, Brown, whatever it is, but I'm going to keep Patty Mills in the second unit because I'm not going to disrupt that for 2 or 3 games potentially. If this was going to be 10 games, then maybe you make a bigger shift, but it's a little bit easier to, play it safe, so to speak, because it's only going to be maybe 2 or 3 games potentially.
That's what I would do. I would leave it. I would leave him with that second group and be able to more effectively stagger Harden and KD like they've been doing. Right. Like I think you should. I think that's more important. I think Patty Mills' long-term role in this team is not as a starter. And so I get why
thrust him into a role that isn't going to be something that you're going to tap back into at any point.
Or you really hope you don't need to, right? Like I think that's more of what it is. Like you really hope. It's not that you're not going to. It's just you do hope that you won't need to over time. And so I think that for this game, or even if it was a couple games for Harris, I would say, hey, let's just hope we can get by with one of these other guys here and keep that other piece of like in line with that because we know that other thing is working. I mean, that Mills thing will work in the starting lineup too, and maybe they switch and move it around a little bit. But I think I would try for at least a game to see if you can get like someone like Carter in there or someone like that you can get, especially against this matchup, like because they have pretty small guards in the backcourt. Like hope that you can get by with it for a game, see if it works, and then try it because the Mills thing is gonna work, right? It's just like, do you need to do it? I think that's more the question.
Well, and by the way, because also Patty Mills was in San Antonio with LaMarcus Aldridge, so you already have that relationship there as well. So, right, so the cohesion in the second unit is built beyond just the Brooklyn Nets. So I think you're right. Maybe they try to get away with it. I'll throw this out there before we do move on, just quickly, because fans have talked about it even before Joe Harris was getting hurt. Any world where if you did move Patty Mills up into the starting rotation, part of your solve from an offensive standpoint would be let's give, if we end up finding ourselves with 7 or 8 extra minutes that we need to fill in the absence of Joe Harris, is that Cam Thomas? See if in the second unit you can fire away. I listen, the fans want to hear about it, and I a little bit too. I don't mind it.
Now's the time. I think you think, right?
Let me just tie it quickly. Because of the way Steve Nash approached the start of the year, threw Nicholas Claxton into the starting rotation, that kind of dart at the wall where we were saying, is that going to be the answer? Like, we don't think so. You know what works. Yeah, but we're just going to try for a couple of games and I can always move off of it because of this opportunity. Maybe you just say, let's just see. Maybe Cam can get rolling a little bit more for a player who played a ton in college and so far this season is getting 2-3 minutes in garbage time scenarios. Hard to find a bit of a rhythm for a young player.
Yeah, like that up and down from the G League. Now does seem like the time. I don't know, but let's talk about that in a second. First, let's talk about our friends over at Rock Auto. If you're a do-it-yourselfer out there, you know that how many parts you think are in a car?
9.
There's more. I don't know the exact number, but I would say it's significantly less than 10,000, but more than 9. Somewhere in that range. Rock Auto has all of them. All of them. Don't even bother going over and count because you're not going to want to count up all the parts because you're just going to want to search for the part that's right for your car. Rock Auto has easy drop-down menus by make and model, so you can find the car part that you need. You're not just avoid going to the local place, avoid them walking back into the car part dungeon and trying to emerge with hopefully the car part you need. You don't have to worry about it over at Rock Auto, and you're going to get parts for 30 or even 50% better than those chain stores. Rock Auto is a family business. They're serving those do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, a couple of decades there for Rock Auto. Prices are reliably low for every customer, every single thing you need of one of those 9 or 10,000 car parts, brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, new carpets, everything you need. You go to rockauto.com. You see all the parts available for your car or truck, right? Locked on. And how did you hear about us box? So they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
And of course, as we thank you for making us your first listen of the day and reminding you that we're free on all those platforms to go and enjoy, it's the kind of thing where we tell you every single day we're going to be coming back in, covering the Brooklyn Nets. That's what betonline.ag wants you to know. They're back this season, and they're better than ever with a new web interface for this NBA basketball season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains the #1 spot for all the basketball and football action this season. You head over to that new website on your laptop or mobile device, and you can receive a 50% welcome bonus when you sign up and make your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. From basketball, football, baseball, postseason is done. You missed it. Come back next year. NHL, boxing, UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. So just quickly finish up the thought on Cam Thomas and just why not, right? Especially if you felt like you had to push Patty Mills up, he's clearly, even with everybody else that has experience at the NBA level, Cam Thomas is the most talented pure scorer that the Nets have to go to if you're bringing Patty Mills up into the starting 5.
Well, we think that, like, we don't, we're not sure
in
about
theory.
Like,
right.
Yeah, like, I mean, he was great in summer league and he, preseason
Done some
games,
nice things in the G League.
Yeah, and so I think that we think that that's probably the trajectory for him. There's also probably a reason that he's not playing right now, whether it's the defensive piece. He did not come in as a defender, and there's some chance that he's not made any progress on that end. Like that would be a problem to bring him in and not have him be able to play any defense would be a problem. There could be a ball distribution thing too. Like we haven't seen him create much for others at really any point. Like the summer league was not that at all. And even preseason stuff was kind of just catching fire basically over and over and over again. At some point, there might be something that says, yeah, he can get his own shot, but it can't just be that, right? Like it can't. Like there has to be another piece for him that has to mature. I don't know. I'm making this up because we don't know why he's not playing. Like there's not really been much talk. There's only conjecture about that. So I would say that those are probably the reasons, because we are seeing some other guys in this draft class getting time now, right? Like even some of these lower end guys are like Bones Highland starting to pick up minutes here in Denver. Like there's other guys that are starting to get looks now, and he hasn't been one of them. But you would think that now, if there's injury, especially around the guard position or the wing position, that this might be time for him to play. It'll be interesting to see. I hope we see it.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, I should say, you mentioned that piece about distribution. So think about the second unit and a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge, right? Like he does need some byproduct of spacing and helping him have those opportunities off the elbow or the baseline, et cetera. So if you get a guy injected in there, unlike a Patty Mills, who is willing to shoot, but is also looking to space and do all the right things on the floor, all of a sudden Cam gets a little bit ball dominant and it could throw things off a little bit. So I would like to see it too. I'm not going to hold my breath for it. The The other thing then to get to is the Golden State Warriors game tomorrow obviously represents, listen, the Nets had a great road trip, but there's a couple of things, and we've talked about it before as far as who they've gone up against over the start of this season. And I'm a little curious about what you think the Golden State Warriors game can represent beyond just, hey, they're a talented team. They're obviously having a great start to their season. The Nets are 7-2 to start the year against quote unquote the bad teams. They've played a total of 5 games against and this is from an offensive standpoint, scoring per game. New Orleans Pelicans, 26th, 28th OKC, 29th Orlando, and the 30th ranked offensive team from a scoring perspective, the Detroit Pistons twice. How much do you think, as good as some things have been defensively for the Brooklyn Nets this year, how much do we look at it and say, you've been playing some really bad offensive teams, that's going to be clouding these numbers a little bit? Could there be like a wake-up call here on Tuesday as far as what it's like to play one of the more explosive offenses? The most explosive offense, by the way. First in scoring, so.
Well, and remember, like, they played the Heat. The Heat have been a pretty good offense this year, and that was a struggle, right? Like, they played Milwaukee when they were gone.
No, and the other quick stat would be they're 3-2 against the top scoring teams that they've gone up against. Second is Charlotte, Miami is 4th, 8th is Philadelphia, 11th Indy, and 12th Washington. So they're, they've had success. They still won some of those games, but obviously when you look at the bulk of where their wins have come from, it's been beating up, as we've said, on the bad teams over the course of the start of the year.
Yeah, like this is gonna be a real challenge. Golden State's been awesome. There's really no other way to put it. Now I will say about Golden State, like they've had the numbers look awesome for them, and they should. They played really well. They've had a really pretty easy run here also. Like they they played OKC a couple times. They've had some bottom feeding. Like if you look through their schedule, it's pretty weak. It's like a couple Grizzlies game in there. They're pretty good, but they played the Thunder a couple times. They played the Rockets, like they played the Timberwolves, who are looking pretty bad. They did lose to the Hornets. Like it's not like they've played an absolute murderers, or all the games have been home. Like they've really not had to go on the road at all so far this year. So there's a couple other little things that are in there that are skewing Golden State's numbers a little. Now they're still been awesome. And so you're going to deal with the Nets are going to deal with a different sort of animal here on offense. Like Steph and these guys, they run a ton. They backdoor you to death, right? They run some stuff that the Nets, have shown too. Like they play Gary Payton a lot in this Bruce Brown role. He doesn't start, but he's getting minutes. A lot of teams have begun to mimic sort of like what the Nets have done with these like sort of stocky guards that can't shoot a ton, but can also get to the rim. The Golden State does do that with Gary Payton. He's a really good defender too, so he can probably give. When he comes off the bench, he'll give Harden some things. Like this is gonna be a tough game. Like it's good that it's at home. They catch Golden State. Like I said, they lost to Charlotte the other day. Did not look awesome in that game. So I think this is going to be a real test. It's super exciting. Like this is exactly why you watch basketball, right? Like to see Steph Curry versus Kevin Durant and James Harden. Like Draymond's awesome. There's some history there. This is the exact reason like you sign up to watch basketball. And I think that it will present some pretty unique challenges for the Nets.
Yeah, it's funny. Like you like watching the blowouts, right? You like saying, look at Kevin Durant, who, by the way, in every game this season, except for the 39-point performance from James Harden on Friday night, Kevin Durant has led the scorers in every game of this season. So yeah, it's great to watch that. But then you just want the test, and even beyond the test of it, I want the matchup. Like I want to see Steph Curry and Kevin Durant not going at it, obviously one-on-one directly, but I just want to see. I don't care about defense at all in this, honestly. I want to see just pure shooting performances on both sides, because it does feel like, you've already seen it circulating on like social media, the idea that, hey, are the Golden State Warriors primed to have another deep playoff run? Is this the kind of thing? It did finally click in my head of, oh, good Lord. Wouldn't a Golden State Warrior coming out of the Western Conference would be arguably the best matchup if you thought about NBA Finals against the Nets? That would make for such an exciting storyline. That's really where my mind went when I saw this on the schedule. Just like instantly was like, oh, here we go. This is the first time that I look at the team and I say, I have to be totally locked into this. We watch every game anyway, but this is a different level.
Yeah, look, this is like, they're super fun to watch. I was completely wrong about them, about how good they would be. I had them finishing pretty like low, like out of the playoffs this year. I'll even with the easy schedule, I'll take the massive L on that already. Like it could all go wrong from here, and that prediction would still look bad. So Steph has just taken it to an absolute different level when it comes to his shooting. They have a couple other guys that could score, like Jordan Poole, Damian Lee's been really good. Like they have other guys here that fit their system a lot better, even without Clay. And so it will be, and it'll be funny too, because if you tune into this game as a Nets fan and you don't follow the league that much, you might say like Jordan Poole, like what's going on here with some of these guys that are getting minutes? Like they're playing Bijalisa a lot off the bench, and he's been pretty good. Old Nets, everyone wanted him forever. Otto Porter's on the team, so this is a team that if you don't watch a ton of basketball, you might even be like Kevon Looney, like you might be surprised about who they're starting and that they've been this good, because it's not exactly a murderer's row of names of like all-star players outside of Steph and Draymond, but it really, really works with what they're doing, and they will exhaust you. Like it will. Steph runs all day long, and it can be really, really exhausting to keep up with them. And so the Nets are gonna. This is why the other reason I would think about like the Javon Carter thing too. Like is that if you feel like you can get away with the shooting, like you kind of do need to keep up with these guards because they will give you fits.
Yeah, and the last thing before you remind the people what to do going into tomorrow night's matchup is the Brooklyn Nets. So the two key stats for the Golden State Warriors that you might think could be red flags. They are second overall in rebounding, 38 offensive rebounds. The Nets are 3-1 against top rebounding teams so far this season. The Nets are 1-2 against teams that limit themselves from a turnover perspective. The Golden State Warriors are 25th. So they are capable of turning the ball over. I mean, that comes down to a little bit of fundamentals of, hey, protect the basketball. You have a good chance to win the game. But that's the thing that does go against the trend here for the Nets. We always worried about the rebounding and winning that battle. Even in this season, without some of the firepower of Kyrie Irving, you're still seeing that the Nets are capable of going up against those type of teams. And it's just about knocking down their shots and having success on their offensive side of the floor. And then to your point, try to run some of these weapons ragged for the Golden State Warriors. We'll see how it shakes out. Tell the folks where to go.
Yeah, you got to go over to YouTube. The YouTube numbers have really been climbing here. It's so encouraging. We have the Locked On Nets YouTube channel. You got to get over there and subscribe. Every episode and more is going up. We had a goal of 400. We blew past that. We're heading toward 500 before Thanksgiving. I think we're going to hit that probably pretty easily. So be a part of that. Go over to YouTube, subscribe to the Locked On Nets YouTube channel. I'm going to put the link in the show notes.
You better believe it. And, life has a way of testing a person's will, either by having nothing happen at all or by having everything happen at once. Paulo Coelho.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. We will be back again tomorrow following the Warriors game, talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.